This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports. Come on, let's do this right. This is crazy.
It just might be the greatest sports franchise in the history of sports. A place where legends are made, and there's always something to talk about. Get ready to immerse yourself in pinstripes. Start spreading the news, hosted by Paul Semendinger and E.J. Fagan, a couple of doctors with a prescription for Yankee fever. And now, here's Dr. Paul Semendinger and Dr. E.J. Fagan. Get ready to start spreading the news.
Hey, EJ, we got Mac back doing the production.
Yeah,
for
we haven't
us.
heard that music in a while.
So we got the old introduction back. How you been?
Doing very good. Pretty nice. My voice is a little rough today, so I apologize to everybody for that, but we're going to get through this.
All right, listen to me, EJ. You and I didn't have a whole lot of time to talk before the show, but you ever think about a pitcher in the bullpen and he knows the team needs him? He knows he's got to give them innings. The bullpen is shot. He's got to give him innings. And he said, you know what? I'm going out there and I'm going to go as long as I can. But he knows that there is one other guy in that bullpen who's willing to step up. My throat hurts too, so I have these little candies here and some Gatorade because my voice is sore. So I was the pitcher saying, you know what, maybe I ought to bag out of this start. But I'm like Lou Gehrig, you too. We don't like to miss games, so I'm out there. But you saying that your throat hurts, that's actually bad news for me because
I've thrown a lot of pitches today, but it's okay. We're going to get through this, and then I'm not going to talk to anybody for 24 hours. So,
nice. No class tomorrow?
I got no class tomorrow. It's just me and my computer tomorrow working, and then another full day on Wednesday. So I think I got this, but we're going to see.
All right, we could do this because you know what? There's nobody tougher than us. So EJ, on Start Spreading the News, the most wonderful Yankee site on the internet, we have a thing always every week called the Tuesday Discussion. And the question that I ask the writers to respond to for tomorrow is a very interesting one, I think, because in my opinion, well, I don't want to give you my total opinion yet, but I don't know if there's a true answer to the question. And so I really want to hear your opinion on this one. Has Anthony Volpe shown in 2023 that he is indeed the Yankees shortstop of the future, or is the jury still out?
I think he's undoubtedly a major league shortstop. I think he's like an average major league shortstop. I mean, he's a pretty good defender, slightly below average hitter. And I think the question is Volpe a top of the lineup hitter for the Yankees? I think he's looked great as a defender. The numbers back that up. I think he's a defensive shortstop, and he's not among the worst hitting shortstops in the league. I think he's about 15 out of 30 right now. So, right in the middle of the pack of shortstop hitters. And that's fine, right? That's a 2 to 3 win player, but I don't think it's what the Yankees need. I think the Yankees need a dynamic top of the lineup hitter to go with Aaron Judge and Jason Dominguez, hopefully, and whatever, right? And I'm not sure that we're there yet. The stat I've been tracking has been the post-Parm Volpe line. So him after the infamous chicken parm game. And for a while, he had really, I think, strong numbers post-Parm. More recently, in the last, basically since the call-ups came, he's been in a pretty steep slump, and he's down to a 742 OPS since then. So he's got a 232 batting average, 311 on base, 431 slug since that moment, which is still really good. Like if he put that up over a full season and played good defense, he'd be a very strong player. I'm still not sure if that. I know that's not a top of the lineup hitter. And I just have to wonder if he's kind of reached something in statistics we call a local maximum. That is, given his approach, given his skill set, is it likely that he ever gets better? And I'm not sure that it is, actually. I'm a little concerned that it isn't. So, go for it.
Since the All-Star break, going with an old-fashioned stat, Anthony Volpe is hitting just 204. And in the month of September, he's hitting just 153. So I tend to agree with you, and that's why I think the question becomes an interesting one. Yeah, he's shown that he can hit home runs. He's shown he can steal bases. He's shown that he can play a good defensive shortstop. But do you think, is it possible that Peraza's really the better of the two players, and the Yankees made the wrong choice in awarding this position to Volpe?
I mean, Peraza's not hitting either, right? I mean, to me, the problem is that none of these guys are hitting. The only guy that was hitting has Tommy John, is about to have Tommy John surgery tomorrow. Peraza, if you look at his stats, he's had a good September. His season stats as a whole are pretty bad. His lifetime stats, similarly are pretty bad. He hasn't hit for any power in September at all. I think he has one extra base hit, 2 extra base hits. So, I'm not sure that I think I'd bet on Volpe if I had to pick one for next season. I think the question here is Peraza making himself attractive as a trade piece? He makes sense. If Volpe is your shortstop, I've been saying I don't think that Peraza makes sense as a third baseman or a second baseman. Maybe a second baseman, certainly not a third baseman. And if he doesn't hit a lot better, I think this starts to become pretty bad. Thank you for that, Angelo. I'm going to look into that as soon as we're done here. I think I don't want to get too down on Volpe, right? This is a rookie season. I think it's been a successful rookie season, but the question is success against what standard? And I think we're going to be disappointed if Volpe turns out to be a guy who has a long major league career, but has it with a 700 OPS, which I think is still on the table.
Yeah, right. He, Bucky Dent was a fine Yankee shortstop.
Exactly.
Bucky Dent was not a star. You can win a World Series, and the Yankees did with Bucky Dent.
And you were allowed to have one or two of these guys as your 8 hitter. That's fine. And if you're a shortstop who can play above average defense, that is a very good enough place to be. And you can kind of imagine how Volpe gets there. He gets there by hitting 20-something home runs, but having a low batting average, not taking a ton of walks. And so he ends up as a guy who looks kind of like the bad version of Didi Gregorius, maybe. And to me, that's fine. It's just not. It's not a great outcome. It's not the outcome that the Yankees need to win another World Series.
Yeah, this isn't their number 10 prospect on their depth chart. This is either their number 1 or their number 2 guy. It's him or Dominguez. And so it's almost feels like it's not good enough. If he becomes Bucky Dent, that's nice. He has a nice career. Bucky Dent had a nice career. As I say, the Yankees won World Series with Bucky Dent. Bucky Dent played for a good long time. But don't the Yankees need more out of Volpe?
Yeah, well, I mean, they need more out of everybody. I mean, right now you have a situation where Volpe is hitting the best out of Austin Wells and Everson Pereira and Estevan Florial and Oswaldo Peraza and Oswaldo Cabrera. And they're all kind of hitting the same bad. They're all doing a version of the same bad hitter, which is they occasionally run into a ball, but they have a low batting average, long base, high strikeout rate. And I think that makes sense given the story that we've heard about the Yankee farm system. I hate that the argument devolved into are analytics good, are analytics bad, right? That's just a dumb way to phrase the argument, right? That's not what the argument is. The argument is, are the Yankees doing it right? Are they implementing the tools that every Major League Baseball team has, and many implement quite well, correctly? And the complaint coming out of Ben Ruda and just some other reporting around that time was that the Yankees spent too much time focused on hitting the ball hard. Not that hitting the ball hard is necessarily a bad thing. I published some data that you posted on Start Spreading the News on my Substack, where we basically made that argument where I said, look, hitting the ball hard going from about, 87 to 92 miles an hour, you start getting better, little bit by bit. And then once you get above about 92 miles an hour, then you really start taking off and you become a really incredible hitter. But the question is what do you have to do to gain that extra exit velocity? What does Anthony Volpe have to do to hit 25 home runs? What does he have to sacrifice? And my guess is he has to sacrifice a lot of hits. And you can see that in his approach. You can see that in his stance. You can see that in how rarely he hits a hard double or a single. And I think that's the wrong choice with Anthony Volpe. I think it's the wrong choice with a lot of these players. To me, it's crazy watching Oswald Peraza in the majors that he was hitting 25 home runs in the minors. Like, he just doesn't have that swing. And I don't think that's a successful swing. I think he's looked better recently when he hasn't hit for a ton of power. But then you see Austin Wells looking terrible at the plate. You see Oswald Cabrera looking terrible at the plate, even though he's looking a little better lately. You see Everson Pereira becoming an afterthought. It seems like they're all making the same mistake, and maybe only Jason Dominguez has the physical talent to pull it off. I buy that Jason Dominguez can be a power hitter, can be a real power hitter. I mean, he's a small, strong guy, right? He's a short, strong guy. I don't look at Anthony Volpe and see this is a guy who should be trying to hit 30 home runs. He's just not that big. Like he there's a reason why small middle infielders have traditionally not been power hitters. I feel like this is what, at the end of the day, it's all going to shake out, where you have a couple of these guys manage to eke out a major league career with this high power, low on base approach. And that's it. I think they all look like good athletes. They all are playing good defense. They all seem to be hard workers with a good attitude. Like, none of that seems to be a problem. The problem seems to be that they were given an approach that I think we're going to conclude works at AA, but not in the majors.
So is that an indictment of Brian Cashman as the general manager who brought this approach, or is it the farm director? I mean, I think you're right on with this. I think the idea is that the Yankees have been going about this all wrong for a long time. And like I was saying, if your top prospect becomes just a nice major leaguer, I mean, the idea with the Yankees is that Dominguez and Volpe, and to a lesser extent, Peraza and Pereira, and maybe Wells, are supposed to be, and of course it's unrealistic to expect them all to be good, but these are your top prospects. And if they just become slightly above average or slightly below average.
Go back farther. Estevan Florial was your top prospect for a long time.
And then the Yankees buried him.
Well, maybe they buried him. Maybe he has the same problem that all these guys have.
Right. But the thing that I don't understand about Florial is, Volpe strikes out a lot. Okay, so does Florial. What I don't understand is how the organization can say that guy strikes out too much, but those other guys who do the exact same thing, that's fine that they strike out so much. The way they've handled Florial to me makes no sense.
The argument of Florial is that he's got this big uppercut swing that doesn't work in the majors, which, by the way, is the same swing that Cabrera has. It's not that different from the swing that Pereira has. And I think that you could imagine in the minor leagues, when you're facing a lot of guys who aren't all that talented, that you can get enough meatballs that swing can work. And that it just doesn't work in the majors. I mean, you ask whose fault it is. It's the GM's fault, right? The GM is the person ultimately responsible for this. And maybe the way the GM fixes it is by firing the farm director. But like, ultimately, those decisions are his. I see Paul has left me. There we go. So Paul is back. But ultimately, it's his fault. Now, maybe he can realize that he has made a mistake and then chart a different course. The Yankees weren't exactly pumping out a ton of top prospects before they kind of took this, I don't want to say more analytical approach, because that's the wrong way to think about it, but approach emphasizing exit velocity over all else. And I hope that they're doing this audit right now, this whatever McKinsey or whatever is coming in and doing some kind of, big assessment of the Yankees. I hope that's something that comes up, and maybe that results in Cashman going out and firing a bunch of people. I don't know. I'll tell you right now, I'm not confident that all these breakout prospects the Yankees have this year are going to do anything in the majors. The Yankees have had a pretty impressive season in the farm. Interestingly, not among their new top prospect. I really don't understand why he's being rated so high, but Spencer Jones, former first round pick. But they have a bunch of other guys like Ben Rice who've really had big breakout seasons. And again, you see these guys being interviewed. They seem like athletes. They seem like good personalities, hard workers, smart. I think Rice was a Yale grad or Dartmouth grad, one of those. And I just don't. I have lost faith that that performance can translate in the majors for the Yankees. It hasn't in a long time. We mentioned Florial. Torres, I think we can say, was another one of those players who has underperformed. I mean, you kill for Volpe to hit like Torres because Volpe's a better defender. But I think we're a little disappointed in Gleyber Torres.
But Gleyber Torres definitely has the numbers, another 25 home run season that puts him in the upper echelon, at least power wise. And he's hitting like 275 of second baseman in cross baseball. No,
I mean, I think Torres looks good because the rest of the team is so bad. Like he is the one person who's kind of performed to his baseball card. He's having a 3.1 win season, which is going to be his second best season of his career. So I don't know. I think Gleyber Torres was a top 5 prospect in all of baseball. He was a higher rated prospect than Anthony Volpe, higher than Dominguez. I think that's a disappointment, even if it's still, you're still happy that you got a solid major league second baseman out of Torres for 6 years at a low cost.
So the big question with Torres is next year his contract is up.
Yep.
You got a guy who can hit pretty well and he's got power. He's a second baseman. I think he's got more power than the typical second baseman, but he's going to be, I think, 28. And he's going to be a free agent. This is going to be his big free agent year. And after next year, I'm not of the mind that this is a guy you want to extend or give a long-term contract to, because as you say, even with the good power numbers, he's just like a 3-win player. Again, a team can win with Gleyber Torres, but he also has mental hiccups on the base paths. There are games when he just misses routine balls. So he has this erratic play as part of his profile. And so the question is, if you're not going to extend him, give him a contract. If you're not going to extend him, or you don't plan to give him a free agent contract at the end of next year, should the Yankees move him this winter?
I'd be up for it. Look, you still have a logjam at second base. So I think one of LeMahieu or Torres should be moved, and you should find a permanent third baseman. That said, Torres is hitting. If we want to win next year, which I'm not opposed to, I think Torres. It's hard. It's going to be hard to improve on Torres. You can do it. I think LeMahieu has a shot to be as good as Torres. But I don't think he's as safe as Torres. I don't want him on the team long term.
So you're saying bring him back next year and then wave goodbye.
I think so. Or you trade him. The thing about the Yankees is they never want to sell at the deadline. But if you're willing to sell at the deadline, that means you don't have to trade a player now. You can see how the team is. It's possible that at the deadline the Yankees are buyers, and they're going to want to keep Torres around. Or it's possible at the deadline that like enough of the prospects work out that they have an extra infielder and they trade that away. So yeah, I'm not opposed to trading him, but I'm also not opposed to keeping him. I don't think he's athletic enough to play second base forever. Torres is very slow. He's already a below average second baseman, and I wonder what he looks like when he's 30. So no, I don't want Gleyber Torres on this team long term. I actually am kind of skeptical that he gets a big contract, but he'll still get a fat contract, even if it's not a kind of a blow you away contract, even though he'll be one of the youngest players in the market when he goes on the market. But yeah, I think he's been so good this season and kind of a rare breed for the Yankees, right? He doesn't strike out a lot. He hits the line drives, he hits the home runs. He has been very healthy, unlike the rest of the Yankees. He's been consistent. To me, that's all reason to say, I think Gleyber Torres is a championship caliber second baseman.
The argument to getting rid of Torres is it allows you to put Peraza at second. You have the insurance of DJ as the backup if you have to go that direction. And you're not then playing Peraza at third, where I don't think he has enough power and I don't think he's going to hit enough to be a third baseman, but he could be a stellar second baseman. I don't know if he's going to hit like Gleyber. I don't think he is at this point, but defensively, he can really lock down that position, based on what he can do at shortstop.
if he can hit. Right, I'm not sure he's a hitter.
So do you see him getting traded this winter? Because then every place is blocked. You don't want him as your third baseman. He's not going to play second.
No,
base,
I think he
then
gets. I
Volpe's
think
your shortstop.
I think he is the obvious trade candidate. Look, Volpe's not getting traded, and I think Volpe is the safe bet to be a long-term shortstop. I wonder what happened if Volpe can be a good enough shortstop as he ages, if he's slows down a little bit, but that's a distance away. I think there's some reason to believe that Volpe could see some pretty big improvements in hitting. I think he clearly has some natural talent for hitting, even if I think he has the wrong approach. You could imagine a better coached Volpe being better. You could also just imagine, this post-Parm Volpe with a 740 OPS. That's a very valuable player. And, with above average defense at short and good base running, to me, that's a player that's worth having on your team. Peraza, look, he might learn how to hit, but he's now getting to that point of 150 plus major league at bats with a very bad hitting line. He's a player who I think there were questions about whether or not he could hit before he came up. One of the reasons why we were advocating for calling up players is because you learn a lot. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to sometimes accept that we might learn bad things about these players and or about the Yankees as a whole, their development, team as a whole. But that said, I think if he is going to be a major league player, let's say he's a light hitter, but he's still a Gold Glove caliber shortstop. Well, the only position that flies in is a shortstop.
Right.
So I think he just makes sense to trade. I think the Yankees are going to need a third baseman. They're going to need a left fielder. They're going to need a temporary center fielder, which is tough. And so I think that he's your best bet to go out and get someone, to get a Dylan Carlson or someone like that with the Cardinals. I don't think you're going to get a blue chip player for Peraza. He hasn't performed, but I do think you could get something for Peraza. I think had they traded him a year ago, they could have gotten a lot more. And, that's a regret. I still was advocating for them not to do that. And I think, I don't want to give 2020 hindsight here, but his value is lower. Oswaldo's value is lower. Austin Wells' value is lower. Everson Pereira's value is lower. They've all been bad. And unfortunately, like if none of these guys are going to perform, you're not going to get anything for them.
So EJ, you caused quite a stir on the internet and throughout baseball because it was you that brought up this Stanton for Trout thing. And then all of a sudden I saw it all over the place.
You saw Stanton for Trout? Really? I didn't know that.
It was even in it was even in a New York paper. I saw Trout makes sense for the Yankees after we talked about it for the second time. And after I ran an article and started spreading the news.
And I wrote a blog post about it on Substack.
And then you wrote it. Yes. And I ran that too, I believe. So you were the one who actually brought this whole thing up. One thing that sometimes bothers me is, there is the, let's just say the old boys network. And so over the winter during free agent season, if writer A figures out where a player's going and they break the story, writers B, C, D, E, F, and G all say, oh, according to writer A,
does that actually happen? I don't know.
Is going, oh yeah, you see it on Twitter all the time. Writer A broke the story as per writer this guy's going there. And when it's something like starts spreading the news, they notice what we write. Sometimes they take our big thoughts and they never say, we saw this on a pretty good website. We saw this on Start Spreading the News, or we heard it on a pretty cool podcast. Or they really ought to credit the source where it begins. But and you're the one who came up with that. No one was saying it till you did. And then it got said a lot of places. But let's say the Yankees and the Angels can't pull off the Mike Trout for Stanton deal, which is the one you want and the one I want. What do you do with Stanton if he can't go to the Angels?
I think that the Yankees are probably better off without Mike Stanton, regardless of the money.
Giancarlo, I'm
sorry.
He used to be Mike.
Yeah, I apologize. The Yankees are getting below replacement level value out of Stanton. So right now he's got, which is current OPS.
And they're getting bad production out of him. And batting him fourth all the time. I mean, that's part of the problem. They don't even move him out of the major spots in the lineup. But I interrupted.
You got a guy like two. You have just the actual numbers are bad, right? So he has a 193, 279, 431 batting line, a 92 WRC plus. So he's a below average major league hitter this season. This is coming off of a decline season last year where he was still slightly above average. But if you look at his numbers, it was all power, right? His batting average plummets, his on base plummets. And this is what happens when players age. Now, I think Giancarlo Stanton looks like he's still in pretty good shape. It's surprising to me that he can't run at all. And I suspect that some hitting coach is looking at him and saying, like, I can get better than that. But the Yankees haven't done it, and I have no reason to believe that they could. I don't think that Stanton is going to, again, go to driveline baseball or something and fix his swing in the offseason. Like, that to me doesn't feel like something that he's discussing, or the Yankees even seem to realize that they have a problem. And so the question is can you get better than a 92 WRC plus from a DH? Of course you can, right? Those are Willie Calhoun numbers, right? Those are Oswaldo Cabrera numbers in some cases, right? Like it is not hard to find a DH that can do that. Maybe a DH that doesn't hog the DH spot the whole time. Maybe a DH that doesn't have that veteran's curse where you feel like he's entitled to a high lineup spot, where he doesn't want to hit off the bench, where he can't play any defensive positions. Like it's just not that hard to replace that kind of production. I think if Stan didn't occasionally hit the ball 450 feet, that we would have released him already. And that was the case when Stan was still a more productive hitter. I think he was a drag on the team when he was, when he was actually still a pretty good hitter a couple of years ago. And now I think he's just a black hole. Again, he's Giancarlo Stanton. He's a potential Hall of Famer, or at least at one point was looking like a potential Hall of Famer. Could hit 500 home runs for his career. I do think that there's a world where he rebounds. I just don't think that the Yankees seem prepared to be that world. The Yankees are going to pay almost all of that salary no matter what. Some of it might end up being like a part of the exchange in the Mike Trout deal. Some of it might end up being, they dump him on a team and they take $5 million of his salary. None of that's really all that different from them just releasing him. And so the calculus is the same. Like, are you okay essentially paying Giancarlo Stanton to not be in the Yankees? And I think that that if I were Cashman, I would release him or do a salary dump that's effectively a release. I think that the Trout deal makes sense because you can effectively release him. He saves a little face. He goes back and plays home. And just like, if you think about the way humans make decisions, humans like to feel like they're not losing as much as they are sometimes. And so instead of paying some team all but $5 million to get rid of Stanton, you instead take half of Stanton's salary and take on Mike Trout's. Like that feels like a win for both sides a little more. And I also think that the Angels are going to be pretty reticent to eat any salary from Trout for similar reasons. So like, I think this is just like a way of facilitating the deal. And, because it makes him a hometown player and Angels fans get a player to watch, and maybe he recovers and becomes good again, and the Angels could trade him at a big surplus. I think it makes a lot of sense. But from the Yankees' perspective, you might as well just release him.
I agree entirely. I mean, I would explore every possible trade opportunity. I can't see teams offering all that much, but if somebody does, I make the trade. If I have to put a prospect or two, as long as it's not one of our blue chip guys, I'd be happy to do that. I think the Yankees in 2024 need to be rid of Stanton. Now, I'm going to talk about Boone in a moment. I'm interested to get your perspective on whether or not he saved his job, but I want to make a book recommendation. I just recently read this wonderful book. It's called Pinstripes by the Tail, Half a Century in and Around Yankee Baseball by the great Marty Appel. Now, Marty Appel had a lot of different jobs with the Yankees for, the better part of 50 years. He produced WPIX telecasts for a while. He was the Yankee PR guy for a while. He got to the Yankees early on as a college kid, answering answering fan mail for Mickey Mantle. He was involved in the old timers days. And, I got the book, and, Marty Pell's a great writer. He's the guy who wrote the tome, the really thick book, Pinstripe Empire. And he's written lots and lots of books. He's won 2 Casey Awards for the best baseball book of the year. But I thought it was going to be just a regular old baseball book. Hey, I remember when Mickey Mantle hit his 500th home run. And, I like reading books like that. I remember when Chris Chambliss hit the game winner and the Yankees went to the World Series. It doesn't read like that at all. It reads as if Marty Appel came to your house, knocked on your door, and sat down at your table, and you both had a cup of coffee or some iced tea or whatever, and you just start talking. It doesn't go linear. It doesn't just say, well, I started with the Yankees in 1968 and then in 1969. It doesn't do that. It bounces all over the place. And it's not just about baseball. It's primarily about baseball, but he mentions other entertainers and other sports figures and all of the various people that his life revolved around or interacted with throughout his whole career. And he goes back and forth, but not in an annoying way. It's just like the way people talk. Like it's a conversation. You end up talking about the DH. Oh, Ron Bloomberg, let me tell you, when the Yankees signed him, type of thing. And then, when Bloomberg got his first hit, I'm making this up, but it was off Louis Tiant. When Tiant was a Yankee, and it just flowed like the way people talk. So it's a quick read, it's an easy read, and it's a fun read. The book is titled Pinstripes by the Tail by the great Marty Appel. So I wanted to make that book recommendation. So the other day, yesterday, was saying, there's lies and there's darn lies and there's statistics and all that kind of stuff. And Michael Kay was saying, the Yankees have the best record in the major league since August 28th, as if that means anything. It means nothing. But anyway, the Yankees went from being a dead last team to coming out of the cellar. They went from a bunch of games under 500. There's still now 2 games over 500. And I just have this feeling, I think we already knew that Brian Cashman was coming back, but the argument's going to be Brian Cashman, his backup plan with the youngsters saved the season. He always has something up his sleeve. You can't get one over Brian Cashman. But I have this sneaky suspicion that they're now going to say, and Aaron Boone kept the team together in their moment of turmoil when everything could have fallen apart. He got them to have a strong September, and he saved the Yankee season. He saved the 500 record streak, which I think is meaningless. And how could you get rid of him? So I think he's coming back. I think it's the wrong decision. What do you think?
I agree. I think it's a little silly. I think that Hal Steinbrenner was very quick to say Cashman's not going anywhere. And I think it's a bad decision. Again, I think the Mets just hired my GM candidate, David Stearns. I published a list of potential Yankee GMs about a month or 2 ago. And, there's only really one other GM that I would be, I'd be very comfortable with. And that is Theo Epstein. I could imagine a world where I say, Derek Jeter is going to be the GM. That's great. Or be the president of baseball operations or the CEO with a more kind of traditional GM. But what really just strikes me is that bad GMs get fired, right? The Red Sox fired their GM. The Mets, I don't know if they fired their GM, but they hired a new GM. The White Sox fired their GM. That's just like what you do. That's just like what happens in the game. It's not weird. It's not abnormal. It's not George Steinbrenner being a crazy man, right?
Well, he fired GMs like every other day.
Right. Well, but there's like an imbalance. There's like a difference. Like we're on the wrong side of the spectrum. And
it's not the pendulum swinging like this. It's the pendulum swinging from firing them every 2 or 3 a year to letting the guy stay in the job for a quarter of a century.
I think if all these young guys came up and 2 or 3 of them look like long-term major league players, guys who you're really excited to see next year, who could hold down those spots so you could be comfortable going into spring training that Pereira and Dominguez and Peraza and Volpe are all going to be strong above average hitters. You got a new core team. The Brian Cashman development strategy, it took a little bit of time, but it really worked out. Like that to me is an argument to keep Brian Cashman. But that's not what's happened. They've won games, but not because of the guys they called up, in spite of the guys they called up. The guys they've called up have collectively hit about 150. They finally shed themselves of some of the really bad pitching, largely in Severino. So that, I think that helps. Their bullpen has been strangely effective despite having a mishmash of names that
no one's ever heard of.
Again, that's the one thing the Yankees are good at, right? Is
they are
having
that every year.
A set of anonymous relievers who are the best bullpen in baseball. But I just don't think that that's evidence of anything. And I don't think any smart team would think of it that way. Now, the Aaron Boone stuff, managers are weird, and I would not be shocked if people internally are blaming people other than Aaron Boone. And I don't know. I just think that Brian Cashman's performance this season is worthy of being fired. I think you start the season off with a roster that was ill-fitting and was not well constructed. You move on to a complete bungling of the Anthony Rizzo stuff. From there, you move and in a way that by itself should be fireable. I mean,
I don't disagree at all.
One of the worst cases of team management that I've ever seen.
How come the Players Association has been so silent?
I don't know. I mean, the players. I don't know. The Rizzo thing is just absolutely puzzling to me. I think there's some other injury things you can kind of point to throughout the season and be like, I'm not sure if that was okay. Like Nestor coming back early, Rodon maybe coming back early. I think maybe you can attribute some of their struggles to that. But then you get to the trade deadline, and maybe this was an ownership thing and not a Cashman thing. We've heard leaks about this, but who knows? They do absolutely nothing. And then they call up a bunch of players who all flop. Like one
of them gets hurt.
Yeah, the one who wasn't
played him when he was complaining about being hurt. Doesn't make any sense.
I think that this has been an awful season for the GM. It does say something that the Yankees are still over 500 somehow. It's amazing, but I don't see any evidence that this team is going to be that much better next year.
I'm saying the same thing.
I mean, look, I should say this. I can imagine a world where next year's starting pitching is as good as we expected it to be this year.
Especially if they sign the Japanese guy.
Yeah, they bring in Yamamoto. You get Nestor back. Rodon, I thought it's looked pretty good lately. Rodon can.
Yes, he had a good game.
Like Rodon can kind of go back to his near Cy Young form. Maybe Mike King, who has been this tremendous, one of the reasons they've won so many games, becomes a really, really strong fifth starter. Rizzo comes back healthy, which we expect him to, and he looked really good before he was hurt. Judge has a full season of not running into walls. Like you can put together a pretty strong team for next year. But I don't think you can put together a really strong team for 2025, 2026, 2027 without a bunch of young guys coming up. And I think that is the Brian Cashman weakness has been for longer than just a few years. He has gone through multiple generations of the farm system where he has been essentially the worst in baseball at bringing hitters up. And I think we're about to see the Yankees go 1 for 7 on prospects to become above average hitters. Volpe's a maybe, so maybe that's 2 for 7. But I think that Austin Wells is probably not a prospect anymore. I think Everson Pereira, Oswald Peraza, certainly Estevan Florial look like quad A players. And maybe they're talented enough that the Yankees can kind of do like an emergency coaching infusion. And over the offseason, they will improve something and they come to spring training with different swings. But I'm just very skeptical of that. The thing that really hurts about that entire group is they were all really strong hitters in the upper minors, right? This is not a case of guys who struggled and then they got promoted, right? Like they were, except for maybe Wells, they were all really killing it at AAA.
And guys like Jake Bowers too, no?
Yeah, I mean, Jake Bowers was killing it at AAA. He's turned into I think a pretty bad major league hitter. all the same approach, right? Swing hard, strike out a lot, hit the occasional home run. Cabrera did really well at AAA, was their minor league player of the year, and looks like an awful major league hitter. And look, I'm not a swing plane expert. I'm not that guy who's going to, slow down a swing and talk about that on a blog. But I can see that Cabrera's swing looks awful and looks like he's golfing. I think we can clearly draw a line from decisions made in the front office to what we see here. And we can clearly draw a decade of failure. They're coming up on Gleyber Torres, who wasn't really their prospect, Aaron Judge, and Gary Sanchez as above average major league hitters in a decade. Maybe Dominguez fixes that. Maybe Dominguez is one of those. Maybe Volpe turns into an above average hitter, but they're not there yet. And Dominguez only has a week in the majors. For all I know, major league pitchers will figure out his flaw, and whatever coaching was there will cause problems there. I think he's a unique enough hitter that I can imagine him just being good no matter what. But I think these are all on the table. And I just ask, what is Cashman adding? What is his superpower that the Yankees are going to benefit from? Finding advanced scouting at the minor league level. I think that they've basically exhausted that option, right? Something that worked 5 years ago isn't going to work anymore. Pitching, I would hope that maybe the Yankees could keep their pitching staff, their pitching coordinators, because whatever they're doing is working. But
you make a good point that Cashman's superpower was finding these guys that no one else knew would be able to perform. Luke Voigt, Didi Gregorius, Gio Urshela. I mean, the lists go on and on. They have Matt Carpenter. They come up. The problem I always saw with that, and I think you and I disagreed a little bit on this, is they were all sort of like Cinderella players, right? They're like the movie Cinderella. They were a fanciful coach or a beautiful princess for a little while, but then magically it didn't last. They became a pumpkin or
I think they got old, right? The problem is they were all like 28 when they came up.
So you couldn't get long-term success out of these guys.
Well, like for example, Urshela, I think had 4 really strong seasons, 3 with the Yankees, 1 with the Twins. This season he was injured, but was, okay, not great. Voigt had 2.5 really good seasons. So I don't think it's like Bowers this year, who had like a good month and then major league pitchers figured him out. I think just a lot of those guys, they were old when they were discovered.
But he hasn't discovered anybody lately.
I mean, I'm convinced that they basically just looked at minor league exit velocity readings and said, this guy hits ball hard, let's get him. And that worked back before other teams figured that out, and now teams have figured it out. That's just my guess. I don't have any evidence of that. I just think it's. I don't see what is working. His free agent signings aren't working, right? Carlos Rodon is looking like a disaster for signing. Maybe that's better next year, but so far it's not looking great. If you go back, you have a couple of good signings. In Cole was a successful signing. Judge as a free agent, we'll see, but probably a success. But he hasn't made that many big free agent signings. And, you start looking at guys like Ellsbury. I guess Rizzo was a good signing in a way, but there's not a lot of there.
Traded for a lot of pitchers who ended up hurt. Every pitcher I think he got last year ended up hurt. Then he gets Harrison Bader. I've talked about this till I'm blue in the face, trades a quality lefty pitcher for a guy who's hurt. And then, like you said before, they stay quiet at the deadline and then they just release him. They could have easily traded Harrison Bader, I'm sure.
I mean, again, we've heard rumors that this is an ownership thing, not a Cashman thing, but just a disaster for trade deadline. I mean, it wasn't as bad as the Angels, but besides that, I mean, we said it at the time. We said the worst thing you could do is do nothing. Mm-hmm. They did nothing, and then they ended up just letting all these guys walk. It's hard. It really is hard. I think that I think we would be having a different conversation if Everson Pereira was hitting 300, but no one's hitting 300 and no one's hitting 200, right? I mean, It's bad. It's really bad. And sometimes you bring in consulting companies to fire people. And I would not be shocked if Hal Cashman says, well, at the end of the day, Hal Steinbrenner says at the end of the day, like, well, I wasn't going to fire Brian Cashman, but McKinsey said I probably should. Like, I would not be shocked if that happens. It has to happen quickly.
You and I could do the job that McKinsey or whoever this analytic group is that's coming in. We could do that job for 1/10 the money, I'm sure, and produce better results quicker than
I really wonder what they're going to do. Like,
I mentioned this the other day. If your supervisor came to you and said to you, I watched your lesson. I know it's different at the collegiate level and the way they observe and stuff like that. But let's just say that, he comes in, he watches you teach, and you taught a bad lesson. And then you have a conference with your supervisor, the department chair, whatever it is. And the department chair says to you, Dr. Fagan, what do you think went wrong there? Now, if you said, I have no idea. I was hoping that rather than you telling me, we hired somebody to come watch a video of my lesson or to come to my next lesson because I have no idea what I'm doing wrong. I mean, if you're in a position of leadership and you don't know where you're making your mistakes, doesn't that sort of say very clearly that you don't belong in that position of leadership? Shouldn't you understand your mistakes?
Baseball has an element of random chance. And so sometimes the answer is like, we got unlucky.
Right. But they can't use that.
But they've gotten lucky too many times.
Correct.
That's the problem. I don't know what these consultants are going to say. Like, are we going to, if we were the consultants, we'll be coming and be like, guy got hit in the head. He has a concussion. Maybe that's why he's batting 050.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is.
This wasn't hard to figure out.
I don't think the Yankees, I think the Yankees may have some you can imagine very specific problems that team has. Like this analytics person isn't talking to this coach, right? And I'm sure an outside consultant could help identify that. But I think he's had big problems. And they have long-term problems. They have a roster that's going to look really ugly in a couple of years if they don't do something about it.
Kind of looks ugly right now.
I mean, after the season, right? I mean, what I mean by in a couple of years, I could imagine this roster winning next year. Especially if a couple of the young guys step up.
EJ, you're like 1,000 miles away from me, but I'm trying to feel your forehead. I think you're running a fever.
I can't imagine them winning in 2 or 3 years, right? When Cole and Judge and these guys start getting a little bit older, there aren't any free agents out there for them to sign other than the Japanese and Korean guys. So, I mean, I think that someone has to come in and diagnose the problem that they have with player development. And I don't think that a consulting firm is going to do that, right? This consulting firm these are business consultants. They can handle business things. They're not, there's no baseball consultants that exist out there in the world, right? Like Theo Epstein isn't coming in on contract. Like these are a bunch of very smart, very well educated, maybe overeducated, probably not that old people from Boston who are going to come in and say, here's what we have observed, right? Like
I've been in various roles at various places inside and outside of my professional life. I've been involved in consultants, and I think you're hitting the nail on the head. We found that this could be a problem, and maybe the way to solve this is, and oftentimes it's window dressing. They're not coming in with any solid, real good answers. They're coming in with boilerplate things. Oh yeah, get form 67 out of draw D. That's the one we'll use for this one. Now I'm exaggerating a lot, but
I think you're right. Like I always was I had a lot of friends in college who went off to be consultants, and my logic was like, what the hell do you know? Like, who are you going to give good business advice to? And I'm sure that they have businesses. Some of these consulting firms might have some businesses where they have specializations where they can come in and actually provide some good advice. There might be certain types of business practices that they're pretty good at, but baseball is a unique problem. And especially if the problem is like your minor league coaches suck. there's not much you can do now. That I don't think they're going to be like, you know who you should hire? You should hire Jorge Posada to be your hitting coach. Like, they're not going to do that. But what they might do, and I think this is very common with consultants, is they might be a way internally for the Yankees to say, we need to fire these people. And consultants often play that role in business where they come in and the management already knows what they want to do, but the consultant is a means of facilitating that, of resolving internal conflict and firing people. I don't think that Brian Cashman is going to get fired. I'd be very surprised if he were, but I wouldn't be shocked if a lot of people get fired. Let's say his entire analytics department gets fired. They're not going to replace them with no analytics. That'd be stupid. But they might replace them with the Dodgers analytics department or whatever, right? Like, they might go and find someone who's better at this. I have watched the one interview that exists with the head of the Yankees analytics department. I forget his name. Michael Fishman. I was not very impressed. And he doesn't have a baseball background. He doesn't even really have a social science background, which would be my choice for an analytics department.
What's your background?
I am a political scientist, so social science.
How about that? You're hired.
I would love it. Well, we'll see. I have a good job, but I would love to be their consultant. But that's not the point is that there's certain types of people who don't know how to use data. And that's the vibe I got from Michael Fishman. It's only one interview. You know, that's not a lot of information about a person. But I feel like I've met a good set of people who do jobs kind of like this, not necessarily in sports, but in other things. And I think I can tell the difference between somebody who can actually see the data and someone who doesn't really understand what they're doing.
Last point, because then we give our voices a rest here. And if you run an organization, I was a principal for a quarter of a century. If there was a teacher that was underperforming, there was nobody else who was going to call that person into the office and say, guess what? This is not going right. Or guess what? We're going to let you go. I had many a sleepless night in my life going, oh boy, tomorrow, I've got to call in teacher X and tell teacher X that teacher X isn't coming back next year. And those are never fun. Those are difficult conversations. But that's what leadership is. Leadership is you have to do what you have to do. You have to be a leader and you have to do the job. If you need, as an organization, to hire an outside agency to come in to make you say what you need to do, which is fire person X, Y, and Z, correct me if I'm wrong, but to me, that just seems weak. If you're a leader, fire the guy or the lady or whoever.
I mean, Brian Cashman has made, I think, over $100 million during his career as a GM or something close to that. I think he'll be fine. I don't think we should have a strong conscience about whether or not to fire the guy. Look, I think there's a legitimate question: is who would be his replacement?
No, I'm not even saying him. I'm saying if you're firing the analytics staff,
why
do you have to have McKinsey do it? Oh, the McKinsey.
I'm just saying that's a thing that businesses do. It's a thing that businesses do.
Oh, that's just weak.
I know it is. Of course it is. But it would not shock me. Let's put it this way. Maybe there's internal debate within the organization. Say Randy Levine wants to fire the analytics staff, but Cashman doesn't. So Hal Steinbrenner, the owner, says, we're going to bring in a third-party referee. We're going to resolve this debate. I think that's possible.
It's just weak.
I think it's weak. I agree. But, it's just, I think that's the role that a lot of these consulting firms play very often. I know, for example, some tech companies that had major layoffs this year. They let the consulting firms pick the people that were laid off. They said, we need to cut this much money. Please come in and tell me who to cut. And they made pretty indiscriminate cuts, right? They said you cut this many people from this department, this many people from that department. So this is not uncommon. The Yankees are not nearly as big of an organization as some of those companies. So this shouldn't be as hard. But again, I don't really care as long as we get to the right result.
Hey, I want the Yankees to win.
Yeah, I want the Yankees to change.
It's time. All right, EJ. We made it. Our voices held out. Had a couple of coughs, but that's why we have a mute feature. This has been the Start Spreading the News program. Odds are EJ and I are both not available next Monday, so there probably won't be a show. I know EJ won't be there. If I can somehow find the time to pre-record something, maybe I will, but it looks like we're going to be, for the first time ever, missing a show next Monday. The streak ends, but we'll be back. I think the next Monday after that's October 2nd. We'll see you right here, 9 p.m. on the Northeast Streaming Sports Network. Have yourself a good night.